Welcome, folks. Thank you for listening to this conversation. Today, we have Justin and Tilly Dillehay. They're joining us to talk about family, kids, and discipleship. I met Justin a few years ago at Southern Seminary, and we were both members of Third Avenue Baptist Church. Justin is currently serving as a pastor. Both he and his wife, Tilly, are writers, are authors. They have 3 children, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves a bit more here in a second, but I'm just really glad to have them with us here to talk about life together. Justin and Tilly, welcome. Thank you so much for talking with us. Can you guys introduce yourselves, give us a glimpse beyond my introduction of your lives in terms of vocation and family life? Can you just give us a quick picture?
Sure. I'm Justin Dillehay. Vocationally, I'm a pastor. I'm one of 4 elders in my local church in Hartsville, Tennessee. That's Middle Tennessee. It's a rural church, relatively small. I'm the youngest of the 4 elders. We have 2 that are basically in their 60s and 2 that are in our late 30s. So I'm the youngest elder, one of 2 staff elders. Tilly is my wife. We were married 8 years ago. We just celebrated our 8th anniversary. And our children are 5, 3, and 1. So when I first saw the invitation, I thought, why is he asking us? Our children are still very, very young. So as far as how you've described your own church, we're still very much in the early stages as well. So I don't want anything we say in this podcast to come off as though we are experts in parenting, but we're enjoying it so far.
I think that's one of the things that got me excited about talking with you guys is knowing that you're in this season of life, this young family, processing the same things that many folks at Mercy Hill are processing, thinking about the same things, trying to figure it out. So it's helpful to hear from folks who are thinking about this biblically and theologically. So I'm super excited. Tilly, can you give us a glimpse into your life?
Yes. So I am definitely right in the thick of it with the small children years. I'm home with them. I have written a couple of books. I wrote a book about envy that came out a couple of years ago called Seeing Green, and then another book that came out this year on food and eating and just the joy of food called Broken Bread. Both of those are with Harvest House Publishers. But so I do write, and I love to write, but I definitely spend the most of my time just keeping the home. And I also co-host a podcast that I just started with a friend, Abigail Dodds, called Home Fires. But but all of that, it feels like all of those things are kind of little satellite ministries around the main ministry of my life, which is sweaty, intense, small child rearing at this time. So, yeah.
By the way, MHC folks, we have a copy of both of the books Tilly mentioned. So if you guys want to participate in the giveaway, if you guys just email life@mercyhillchapel.com, and at the end of the month, we'll pull a name out from the folks who have emailed and get you a copy of one copy of both of those books. So, so obviously both of you guys have done thinking and writing on marriage. I know both of you guys write also for the Gospel Coalition. Writing.
Forgot to mention that. Yes.
Yeah. Justin, you're an editor for them. Do you still serve in that capacity?
Yes. For the past year, I've served as a contributing editor, mainly for the Read the Bible initiative that we've been doing this year, and I believe they're going to be doing that again next year.
Very cool.
Yes.
So this whole constellation of issues, the marriage, children, household. What have been some of the influences that have developed your guys' thinking? And I'm thinking, everything from growing up to, theological influences to books you have read. What comes to mind?
Right. So Tilly and I both grew up, I would say, in intact homes. Her parents divorced earlier this year, but she grew up in a home with her mother and father and many siblings. I did too. So My dad didn't go to church with us, so I didn't have that area of example that I would follow now, but he did teach me and model a lot of good things for me. So just having dad and mom in the home. My mom was mostly a homemaker when I was growing up. By the time I got older, and when I was in high school, she homeschooled me and my younger brother. I'm 38 years old, so I grew up in the 90s, largely as a teenager, and some of my earliest memories of family of family theology came from Focus on the Family and Promise Keepers. Promise Keepers were really big when I was a teenager, and I was never into it, but I guess absorbed a sort of idea that the family is very important, and from Promise Keepers that men ought to be servant leaders in their home and take their role seriously and repent of their laziness and other sin. So those were just sort of early memories, I think, of early influences. Later, I came under the influence of John Piper in the early 2000s, and that had a large impact on me in many ways. But it was, I believe, from Piper that I first encountered the word complementarian and just that whole debate about gender roles and the nature of men and women. So Piper's, just listening to his lectures on manhood and womanhood, had a big influence on me. I grew up in a conservative culture, so I was never in a church where women eldership was promoted or anything like that. So I haven't had to overcome some of those ideas in my thinking, but it was only later with Piper that I feel like I understood the basics of why we believed what we believed about men and women and family. Other influences, I would say, as far as writers, Douglas Wilson, his book Reforming Marriage. In the last few years online, some of the writers I've enjoyed reading are men like Joe Rigney, who's at Bethlehem College and Seminary, Alistair Roberts, Stephen Wedgeworth. There's some guys who are writing on manhood and womanhood that I find their writings very helpful. Just as far as examples, though, my own pastors, Donnie Martin, Harold Carmen, the two older pastors that have been my shepherds at home, have both just set very godly examples of how to be husbands, how to lead a family. So they deserve a lot of credit for their godly example.
For me, yeah, my family. So I definitely had a strong father who just I feel like he was a teacher, and he was a kind leader in the home. And we were homeschooled. We were definitely taught that sort of complementarian theology as the ideal, when I was growing up. So I knew what that was. I knew how it was supposed to be. And I definitely knew, I could see in marriages, that I was seeing around me, I could see both good and bad examples of when that works well and when it fails and why it fails, I guess. So I had an idea of what I was going to do when I got married. I was going to submit. I was going to be an encourager. I was, I had great ideas, I think. And then I think that like Justin said, the church that we're in now, there are some really wonderful examples in the church of older, mature couples. And then I think Justin, just in his reading and his thinking since we've been married, I know that he's definitely developed my mind still further on the question of manhood and womanhood. So,
is there anything you guys learned about this area of life along the way that you wish you would have known earlier?
Yeah. As far as a man needing to be assertive, having a vision for his life, a vocation, like I always knew that my role as a man and as a husband was going to be, I needed to be the head, I needed to be the leader, I needed to give direction to the home. But in my late teens, early 20s, I was largely aimless. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got out of high school. I had some bad theology for several years there and was just afraid to go out and do anything. So reading DeYoung's Just Do Something in the late 2000s was very helpful for me. But I wish if I could have gone back. I felt like my life took longer to take off, to launch. In some ways, I'm like a poster millennial as far as going to college without knowing what I wanted to do, getting a degree that I then didn't do anything with. I had a teaching degree. I'm not teaching school. So I wish I could go back and have a better vision for what God wanted me to do with my life. Now He's worked it all out for good. It just means I got married when I was 30 instead of 25 or 24, but I didn't know Tilly when I was 25 either. So it's good that it took till 30.
Tilly, how about you? Anything you wish you could tell yourself 10 years ago about life, about marriage, womanhood, parenting?
Yeah, I think there's so much. There's so much that I've learned just from the real women that I'm around in the church that I'm in now, and I was converted in this church about 10 years ago, so I still feel that kind of relative newness in the faith, even though it has been 10 years. I guess I wish that I could have known these women when I was a girl. I wish that I could have seen in real life the kind of faith and the kind of obedience to Scripture, and just the gentle, meek service that I see modeled all the time now, and that I've learned. I mean, it's still something I just glean from these women, but it does. There are times that I mourn not having been around women not having been around these women when I was in my kind of formative years. So that's all I can think of.
And this might be a hard question to answer. How do we make sure that the next generation, that our kids maybe have less of these, I don't want to call them regrets, but less of these kind of, man, I wish I knew that earlier type thoughts?
I do think the responsibility lies primarily with the parents. So, in our own lives as parents, the people we need to be discipling most in these things are our own children. And so I will try to keep my son as far as I can from making the same mistakes that I've made. We'll see how I'll get back with you in 10 or 15 years to see how that's going. But Hillary Clinton famously said, "It takes a village to raise a child." And while I don't agree with everything she would mean by that, there is still truth in that no dad is going to model every virtue perfectly, or no mother is going to model everything perfectly. And so the local church does give you those other men. There are things that I didn't realize I was getting from my dad until later, until I was out of the house, until I was grown. And I took it for granted growing up. I didn't realize that, other dads aren't like that, and my dad had this strength that I just absorbed. And then on the flip side, there were things that I didn't realize were weaknesses until I was out and around other men and realized, my dad would never have done that. And okay, I've got to learn to do that now. And so, I think we're all going to be that way. My son Henry, that's going to be me for him as well. There are going to be things that he's going to have to get from other men, and I think a humble man is okay with that. Is going to want other men in his son's life. Primarily the parents' responsibility, but also that of just men in the church discipling younger men.
And when I hear that, I just think of how grateful I am to be in a church community that has the kind of staying power that I think our little church has. There are there's so many people who've been in that church from the beginning for 35 plus years, and families where the children genuinely grew up in this same community of people, knowing the same community of people their entire lives. And that's very foreign to me. We did a lot of moving when I was growing up, and I like the excitement of change. I've still kind of enjoy change because I just got, I just got where I enjoyed it as a kid. But there's something about knowing if the Lord wills, I could imagine my children still being in this church and knowing these people when they are graduating from college, and having that kind of relational capital in their lives. That makes me think, oh man, if people could just stay in churches and really commit and grow in the same church body, I just think parents would have so much help in what they're trying to do.
And that seems to be the biblical vision, this partnership between the church and the home, as a means of evangelism for the next generation and as a means of discipleship. So my next question for you guys is, as you think about discipleship in the home, what does that look like, right? What, for example, do family devotion and family worship look like for your guys' young family?
Well, like I said, we've been married for 8 years. We had our first child about 3 years in, I guess. That makes sense. She's 5. So I would say for the first 3 years, our family, me and Tilly and I was very spotty in leading family devotions. So, it was just us two. I would start it, and it would trail off. Tilly could tell you stories about me trying to reading through Puritan books with her in the first couple years of our marriage, which I thought I was doing a great thing. And
I was, oh man, yeah. I didn't even know. I don't think I even knew that that was like you were trying to institute a devotional time. I was just like, I was working.
This is great. Here's Richard Sibbs. Yeah. I thought you'd like this. And
so I would come home from a long day of work. I was I was a newspaper editor, so I was coming home exhausted all the time. Always having to run out and take pictures or whatever. And it'd be after supper, and he would pull out this heavy tome and start reading aloud. And
it was a Puritan paperback. I wouldn't call it a heavy tome.
At the time, I was not used to it. And I didn't know at that time that for Justin, reading aloud is basically his love language. So for me to be like, honey, can we not do this tonight? Was probably was a totally deflating thing for him. Like this is what he was trying to do, was to do a family devotion time. And I just didn't get that. I didn't understand what he was trying to do.
So learn from, know your wife's love language, and
or just know her.
Ask
know
her feedback. Know her frame. Remember that she's dust, and especially if she's working full time. When the children, even when Nora, the first child, came along, I still was not very consistently leading, and there was a point finally where I think it was around the time I was being ordained. So I was just challenged by the men who were examining me, as I would try to be honest with them about how things were going there. And they just really challenged me on the importance of it. And so we started, what did we start? We started early on, I guess we just, Nora was a baby. So we read, what did we read? Did we read a Bible verse? This is 5 years ago now.
I guess so. I mean, she was coming on a year there.
We sang songs. Eventually, when she got old enough, we started doing catechism with her. And now, today, our normal practice is we call it read and sing. We do read and sing. And normally after supper or dinner, the evening meal, after the dinner, we will gather on the couch. We'll read a Bible story from a children's book. We've used the Big Picture Story Bible by David Helm. We've used Everything Your Child Needs to Know About God. We've used Bible stories for children. There's a good one we were looking at recently called Jesus Rose for Me by Jared Kennedy that our children love. And so we haven't done a lot of reading straight from the Bible yet, because our oldest is 5. So we're trying to get the stories in there. And so we'll read the little story, sing a song, one that they know or that we're trying to teach them. And we've been doing catechism. So I've been using the children's catechism. Who made you? God. What else did God make? God made all things. So Nora and Agnes, the two oldest, are able to do that. Henry, the 1-year-old, if you ask him who made you, he'll say God. So he's got one question down.
The girls stand on the coffee table
Yeah.
to do their recitation. It's kind of like a
Public speaking.
like they have to sort of pick a spot to stand up there, and then they take turns answering the questions. Or sometimes the older sister can get a little further in the book, so the younger sister can sit down. But yeah, they enjoy that, doing it together like that.
So those practical details, super important for me, and I think for a lot of folks at Mercy Hill. So I'm going to ask you guys some really like nitty gritty type questions. So you guys do this after dinner. Do you put away the dishes, or do you gather? So do you guys take care of the table and put away the dishes, or first and then gather, or do you gather and leave everything on the table? What's the best
good
practice?
Question. Yeah, well, so when we began this, the way that we actually got to the point of this being an absolute family habit where we don't even have to think about it anymore, the way it started was I said, honey, what if we just do this at the table? Like when we're already all here, this is one place that we know we're all going to gather at least once a day. We're here. So since we're still sitting here, we don't get up. We keep the little books, whatever we're using. It's over on a shelf in the same room. At that time, our living room was our dining room. So just grab the books and do it right there. So we definitely weren't doing the dishes at that point. And now it depends. Sometimes Justin will take the kids and play outside. If the weather's nice in the winter, we're more likely to come straight to the couch, and then I do dishes later. And in the summer, right now, just the nice weather, he tends to go outside with them first, and then we come back in for.
Sometimes that's dangerous. Sometimes that leads to forgetting.
To just go into bath time or whatever.
It's late. We need to get them to bed. Mm-hmm. So
I do feel like the most consistently helpful thing has just been right after that meal.
That would be the thing. The advice there would be find the time that's going to work for you. It doesn't have to be some say it's the morning, but just find the time that's going to work.
Talk about Justin, how lowering your expectations for what we were doing was so helpful.
So, I think a couple of things that if you ask, like, what is it that kept me from doing it for so long? And what I can't speak for others, but for me, I think a lot of it was having this huge detailed worship service in my head that was so much work that it was too much. I didn't want to do it. And I tend to be someone who feels like he has to put in a lot of prep and preparation for stuff. I carry a full manuscript to the pulpit when I preach. So the idea of just sitting down and without preparation and doing family devotions was just like, I can't do that. I got to put time into prepping. These are 1-year-olds, these are kids. You may be telling them the story for the first time. You're 30 years old. You've known this for 20 years. You can tell them this story without preparation. Mm-hmm. So, get up.
Or it's a book. So you just open the book to the
read
day,
the book. Read the book, sing a song, but just keep it simple. And I'm sure as our kids get older, I'm sure that'll evolve and there'll be more engagement and they'll be asking different questions. Not keeping it simple is what I feel like keeps a lot of people away because they just have unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I wonder how much the pressure that we put on ourselves, especially as fathers, to try to do this. Actually, the perfect sometimes being the enemy of the good, where we have this vision and not realizing that that those 5-10 minutes of just being present with your family, talking about Bible stories, singing together, like that's going to add up. Even if you quote unquote mess up something or forget a name or what it doesn't matter. Those 5-10 minutes are going to add up. They're going to add up. They're going to form this little mind and form this little soul with the help of the Holy Spirit. Another practical question. How do you guys deal with discipline issues during family devotion? So someone's having a really bad day and they don't want to sing and they flip out. What do you guys do?
Yeah, that happened just tonight, actually.
Yeah.
I had to just this was a spanking incident, and I had to just tell Agnes, okay, you need to go to the bathroom. Daddy told you to do this, and you didn't do it. So that's not unheard of. So just that, if there's just blatant disobedience, if some standard has been flouted, then it's not like it's not like you're in the middle of a church service, stopping the church service to handle this. It's your home. It's just you and your family. So, we went and took care of it, and we're back quickly, and things moved on smoothly.
Right. That's so important how you're describing it, because family devotions aren't a show you're putting on. It's
Right.
part of spiritual formation. So if we need to pause spiritual formation to do some discipline, I mean, theoretically, that's part of spiritual
That's part of
formation
the
too.
formation, right.
Yeah.
Driving the foolishness from their heart. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And not definitely, you're right. Not a show. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's good that you asked that, because you should expect that to happen. And
I think one of the challenges, and it's the same way in any moment when you have to do discipline, not just during family devotions, but also during dinner
church.
or during But I just mean any time in the home when this is happening. I do think one of our big temptations is to be surprised. Like, what? You're a 3-year-old? Why wouldn't you just fall in line? And why did you? Tonight it was like, there's no reason why she didn't want to do the thing. She just didn't want to do it, and I think there's a temptation for us to just be angry because we know how we want it done. We know what we would like to see, but I think it's really important to expect those moments and to say, we've got a plan in place for when those things come up. And not to look at the kid and be like, why are you this way? But to just know, why they are, because it's why you are that way. And, I just think the sort of outrage really goes away when you expect that that's going to be part of your day-to-day responsibility.
Right.
Backing up from after dinner devotions, for those who didn't grow up maybe in a Christian family or didn't see this modeled, but how you guys kind of were describing that at one point you were doing your devotions right at the table. And I've heard, other mature Christians talking about having your devotions as part of the meal. So how can, no matter how we approach this, how do family meals contribute to family life, to discipleship, to worship? Tilly, I think you address some of that stuff in your new book. What does that look like for you guys? What's your approach to dinner time?
Yeah. So I just think it's very, very, very important to us. And I think it's very important to family culture to have a family meal at least once a day. We're blessed. And I think other families probably too are experiencing this during the COVID crisis that many families have come home to work. Like many parents are home working where they were working in an office. So I've heard several people say, guess what? We're eating 2 meals a day now together. Like we get lunch together now too. And so we all gather for that. And, but just the act of being there together is number one. And that's not to be taken for granted, because so many of us have made our lives so busy that we've crowded out just the basic family meal. So just being there, having a meal doesn't have to be fancy, but everybody sitting at the same table is important.
There was an essay by a British psychologist, an essayist named Theodore Dalrymple, that I read several years ago. And I think Tilly ended up quoting this essay in the chat, probably the section of the book you were thinking of, Ihor, where he's a medical doctor, and he's describing visiting people's houses, doing house calls in poor neighborhoods, and how he said, I've never seen any evidence of people cooking or eating together. He said the people, I'm looking at the book here in front of me. He said even if other members of the household are present, they eat alone and never at the table. They slump on a sofa in front of the television. Everyone in the household eats according to his own whim and timetable. even in so elementary a matter as eating. Therefore, there is no self-discipline, but rather an imperative obedience to impulse. And so just the idea of, whether you're a Christian family or not, even if you're a non-Christian family, I think there's something healthy about eating together, just of not viewing the members of your household as we're not just a bunch of individuals living under the same roof, right? We are a family. There's things we do together. But imagine a sports team that never played ball together. It's like that's what you do as a team. And eating at a table together is not all we do as a family, but it's one of the things we do. And it just provides. For us, I work from home, so we typically eat together twice a day. But most families are not going to be able to do that. But at least to have one time a day where you come together. Hopefully try to shut off your phone. I fail with that. I fail with that often. That's an ongoing battle to get rid of the phone and just give your attention to each other or whoever guests maybe you have invited into your home that night. There's lots of, I think, just added unknown, intangible benefits to eating together as a family.
So we sing the doxology at the beginning of every meal. The kids are little, so a lot of what we're doing at the table now is just, I think conversationally, it's a fun time. Like it's a fun time to hear from the different people, but it's definitely like, well, Justin, you could talk about this. Just kind of what Justin would like is to sit down and have a long conversation with me about something heady without any child interrupting at all. And that's, I think,
unrealistic, you say?
Yeah. He sits down at the table and genuinely thinks this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's I think it's a really good process for him.
Be not surprised when your children interrupt as though something strange were happening to you.
Yeah. Just that, this is a time where, these little kids, they've got something on their mind, and it's not necessarily related to what's on your mind, but this is the time when you ask them about it. You find out, what did you do today? Little 3-year-old Agnes, and you get the 3-year-old version, of the day. And what did you do today, Nora? And get the 5-year-old version. Agnes likes to play a game.
I Spy.
Yeah, she likes to play I Spy at the table. And so, everybody just kind of loves on Agnes by playing that game that she loves to play, which is just simple. We're just looking at colors around the room.
And some of that just needs to be more deliberate on my part, to have the expectation that it's not like I don't have any other time to talk to my wife about the day or ask her questions or share things about the day. It's just a lack of self-control that I want to do it now. And the kids are going to be in bed at some point, so we'll have that opportunity. So just it's a labor that I need to come to the table armed with the mindset that this is time for the whole family. I need to take an interest in what my children might be thinking.
While balancing that with the idea that
you don't need to interrupt. You do need to learn not to interrupt.
A 3-year-old doesn't need to believe everything they have to say must be said the moment they think of it. So, that's where we're at right now, is just figuring out that balance of expecting that she doesn't interrupt her parents, but also,
which is true. I sort of rationalize we're going to talk about the heady thing with, they need to learn not to interrupt. And that's true, but you also need to know their frame and not be selfish in your own conversation topics. And this just reminds me, it's something you were talking about earlier with just the culture of child discipleship in the church. And I think it's just an area where I'm not enough like Jesus. Like, you read in the Gospels about the Lord and how he treated children, how he, put them on his knee and blessed them, and how his disciples were like, he doesn't have time for this, take them away. And his attitude is, no, let them come. And I am not as like that as I should be.
I think any parent that's, dealing with this season probably feels that tension. So our oldest daughter has just turned 3, and she's just at this age where she could kind of have a slightly longer conversation. And so sometimes it's just so fun asking her questions and hearing her take on the world. But then, sometimes me and my wife are talking about something, and she has an opinion that she wants to express, and so you wonder when is it okay to just be interrupted and go with the flow, and when is when is it bad for her to feel like she needs all the attention all the time? So yeah, definitely feel that tension. So final question for you guys. What are some unique struggles that parents may face in raising, discipling their children? And I'm not thinking so much in terms of, the household life, but that's included, but more considering like where we are as a culture, where we are in history. And again, this might look different from where you guys are and from where we are in Cleveland, but any thoughts on that? Things that you guys see on the horizon or experiencing right now that you're thinking, man, this is unique. This is something that's going to take some focus and some purposefulness to deal with.
Yeah, the Bible tells us there's nothing new under the sun. So when we're thinking of unique struggles, they may not be completely unique. One of the first things I think of is the ubiquity of screens, of phones in your hand, TV. You go to the gas station and there's a TV there for you to watch during the few minutes that you're pumping your gas, because you apparently can't do without it for that time. And, our grandparents may have had their newspaper or whatever it was to distract them from their kids. But it's a challenge for us that as parents and as husband and wives, just to get our phones under control, and so that our kids are not constantly feeling like they have to compete for our attention with not even with work, not with important things, phone calls of real conversations, but just trivial nonsense that we're looking at on our phone. And a lot of sometimes the strife and irritation just comes from being interrupted while in the middle of doing something you shouldn't have been doing anyway. So there's just, I think, this unique challenge that children under 12, the iPhone generation, has had to fight for their parents' attention in a way that maybe previous generations hadn't. At least with this, you can do a lot more. You can be a lot more distracted by a phone. There's a lot more you can do with a phone to distract you than a newspaper. So that's one thing in our home that you have thoughts on that, as far as just, we were talking about authority. We were talking about the Leonard Sachs book that you.
Yeah. So what is that Leonard Sachs book called?
You
have it.
The Collapse of Parenting by Leonard Sachs. He's not a Christian, to my knowledge, or at least it doesn't come across in the book. But he's a medical doctor and a child psychologist. But this book is about the collapse of parental authority, and just a lot of the way parenting has,
the way we've sort of transferred authority from parents to children, where just in our world, I guess in the world now, the Western parenting culture, there's this move towards my kid knows what's best for them, and just a real reluctance to say, I know what's best for my child until they're grown. So just this showing up in parents not feeling like they can tell their kids what to eat, or what or how much screen time to have, or who to be with, who to hang out with, or even from a really, really, really young age. And that book just does a really good job of showing what the fruit of that has been, just like over medication for children, and just a
obesity,
obesity,
just things like whatever they eat, whenever they want, when they want.
Yeah, as a medical doctor, that's a main thing that he really is concerned about. As I think as Christian parents, I think that we have even larger reasons for being concerned with preserving the idea of authority structures, because we know that God is a father, and he's a good father who has authority, and that it's from that, that fatherhood that every father on earth has been named, that there is an authority structure that we know to be a good authority structure, that the world doesn't understand how any authority structure could be good. But I think it's really, really going to be important for us to try and preserve that idea in our homes and for our children. And we're going to be working entirely against the current of culture when we do that.
you think of parents in centuries past, J.C. Ryle, Martin Luther, when you hear them talk about their parents, it seemed like there was very much more of a children are to be seen and not heard mentality. Like you read the old stories of the schools that Dickens writes about, where the kids get beaten with the ruler. If they
just terrible.
Yeah, it's like extreme. Yeah, you read that, you're like, wow, that's really hardcore. That's really way out there. We're like most of us, like that's one ditch. This sort of authoritarian, overbearing, cruel, always ditch. Right, the Dickens ditch. And that's fine. We definitely want to stay away from that. But most of us today are light years away from that, and we're much more likely to fall into this permissive ditch. And there was something you may remember. You may have had Dr. Randy Stinson at school. I took a family discipleship course by him, and something he said that just stuck with me. He was giving this illustration of child rearing of a cone, of like one of these orange. What's this?
Like a triangle?
Yeah, like a triangle, like a cone that you put on the road, to mark stuff off. And he said that parenting is like an upside down cone. I believe I'm getting this right. Basically, he was saying the upside down cone, it starts very narrow at the bottom and it expands as it goes up. And the analogy was, he was saying, when your children are very young, very small, you don't give them a lot of options. Like you don't place a lot of decisions on them because they're simply not capable of making those decisions. You don't give them a lot of options. You don't discuss nearly as much. What they're needing to learn in those early years is how to obey. And as they get older and more mature, then the cone broadens. The options broaden, and as they get older, eventually you're going to release them all together, and they're going to go and be adults. But he was saying that a lot of parents have that almost upside down, or they have it right side up. It's the opposite. They have it the opposite, where they start off with their very young child, and they're saying, "Well, Johnny, what would you like for breakfast today, or what would you like to wear?" And they're giving them putting all these decisions on what school would you like to go to.
The Leonard Sachs book was it? They were saying these parents were like, my 8-year-old needs to decide which school to go to.
Which school? Yeah, it's a
as
pretty
if
big
they're
decision.
in any kind of position to make that kind of decision.
There was an article about encouraging parents to ask your toddlers when they would like to be changed. When should your diaper be changed?
And some of this is I guess some of these things are so contrary to the light of nature that you would hope that most people would see through them, but not all do.
Not necessarily.
And
not necessarily.
So when you start off upside down, giving too many options before they're even naturally capable of making these decisions, Dr. Stinson said, what you get, or when you do a lot of discussing, instead of teaching them, your role is to learn how to obey here. He said, what you end up with is a know-it-all child who thinks he knows a lot more because he's had all this discussing. And so then as he gets older and you're less able to control him just because you're bigger than him, then you feel like you have to start clamping down because now they're getting into all this trouble. And it's going the opposite direction. You're getting stricter as they get older when it should be the other way. Right. And so I feel like I had heard that from other people, and I've certainly observed it since that, oh yeah, I see that that's accurate. But Stinson that stuck with me. So I just think the authority issue is a challenge, is a unique challenge for us that it wasn't perhaps for parents in years gone by. I think an obvious one in our day is just gender and sexual issues that I'm not aware of any other. I'm not a historian, but I'm not aware of any other generation that was having to deal with the idea of transgender, that your kid could decide to change genders, or that others were going to encourage him or her to consider that as an option. So these are very unique challenges in just how do I teach my son what it means to be a man in a culture that doesn't think there is such a thing as acting like a man, as distinguished from acting like a woman. So like we were watching the Swiss Family Robinson with our kids earlier this week. So this is like 50, 60 years old Disney movie. You know what I'm talking about here? The one where they're on the island and like the treehouse. And, there's a part in the movie where the two sons are sailing around the island and they find this boy, as they think it's a boy. And turns out it's a girl dressed up like a boy because she was captured by pirates and they didn't want the pirates knowing it was this attractive girl. So they dressed him up like a boy. And as soon as they find out it's a girl, everything changes. Like the way they treat her changes. They start fighting over her. They're jealous of each other. And there were a lot of things that just totally politically incorrect today that Disney was doing 60 years ago. Disney certainly wouldn't be doing them today.
But they immediately stopped calling her like a weenie boy.
Oh yeah, they were,
and start being very
when they
protective of her. Just very
when they thought she was
chivalrous.
a boy, they were calling her names to each other, thinking he was a sissy and things. And as soon as they know she's a girl, they're trying to make it easier on her. To protect her. And today, to put it mildly, you don't see that very much in the stuff your kids are going to watch. So if I set my kids down to watch this new Star Wars, the recent Star Wars trilogy, there's the scene in The Force Awakens where, was it Finn? Finn sees Rey about to be attacked and he's about to go help her. But, before he can as much as get his gun out of his holster, she's already kicked all of their butts, with her karate skills. And I just thought the whole, what the scene is communicating is sort of like, the girl doesn't need you to protect her. Like they can take care of themselves. So the culture has never been, or the world, the world has never been perfectly in sync with the Bible's teaching about male and female and husbands loving their wives and wives submitting. The world has always had some form of rebellion against God's holy standard in creation. But there are ways in which parents could have expected or trusted the culture by and large to communicate solid things. Like I can generally put my kids down and watching Swiss Family Robinson and feel like they're going to get something like I want them to get about how a boy should act, how a girl should act, how a boy should treat a girl, and so on. And I don't trust that's not true today. Like I'm more likely to feel like they're going to get exactly the opposite of what I would want to teach them. So there just isn't a lot of good, except in period pieces where you still have to portray the past as it was often. And so that's just a challenge to how am I going to teach my son what it means to be a man, our daughters what it means to be women, when we ourselves, we struggle to know often. It's not like we were all taught that well either. So it's just a challenge for us.
So if someone's listening and they're wondering, man, I'm seeing all these potential pitfalls and ditches that I could, I'm close to this ditch on this end and I'm close to this ditch. And, they've got a few toddlers running around and, they don't have maybe a lot of time to do thinking and reading about this stuff. They're just trying to get by. What word of encouragement and a word of basic counsel do you tell, that mom that's thinking about this, that dad that's, putting in 60 hours at work and he's trying to figure out how to raise his son and, he's seeing all these ditches, but he doesn't know all the answers. He's trying to be present in the family, trying to be present in church. What's one thing that you guys would leave him in as far as a starting place to move forward with all these potential hazards along the way?
So one thing immediately comes to mind, honey, and it's just things that several people have said to me recently about soaking yourself in the Word of God. So I heard more than one person talk about this recently, saying if you spend this amount of time on social media or watching TV or basically getting the world's version of what the truth is, then you should at least match that, which of course would mean that we all spend much less time watching TV. But just basically that if you are not soaked and steeped on a daily basis, eating and drinking the Word of God, reading it and studying it. If you don't have time for anything else, that is something that you need to be making time for, because that's going to shape you. And every minute that you spend allowing the world to shape you by what you're consuming of the world's content is going to make it that much harder for you to see these things the way that God sees them, I guess.
It's helpful to remember just that this is God's idea. It's a fallen world, so it's Satan is here. It's not all going to work perfectly, but the family is still God's idea, and He's on our side. He's in your corner, and though your children are sinners, though their foolishness is bound up in their hearts, they have original sin. I think when you love your children, I think they are wired by God to love you in return. Sometimes my sort of reluctance and timidity to get in my children's lives, to talk to them, it's all on my side. They love it. They light up at the slightest efforts of me to show them some attention. Just being faithful in the small things, and just, you mentioned earlier, just the influence of being there, and being all there when you're there. And if you're working 60 hours a week, you may not be able to do anything about that, at least not immediately. And so it becomes all the more important just to be all there when you are there, and not be distracted by the screen or by the work, to try to leave the work at work. But yeah, the Lord is on our side as parents. This is His idea, and He has mercy and grace for us to help us.
Well, guys, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. Mercy Hill, if you want to get to know Justin and Tilly more, look up Justin's articles on the Gospel Coalition. He has a great one. What's the title of that article, Justin, about Romans 8 making you a Calvinist?
Yeah, I think it was something like how Romans 8 helped make me a Calvinist, or made me a Calvinist.
Yeah. Fantastic article about Reformed theology. Tilly, I've listened to three podcasts now of Home Fires, and I've been recommending them to everybody. How long are those going to keep going? What's the plan with that podcast?
Yeah, the plan right now is to do about 15 episodes for this first season. So it isn't many, but we're trying to pack them, full of good things and good guests. There's always a possibility if I can get some help with the editing. I'm doing all the editing work myself right now, which is basically the greatest burden of the podcast. Just sitting down and having the conversations is not burdensome, but the editing, the tech stuff has been. So I don't know, we'll see. But I think maybe next year we'll talk about doing another season. So you can look for that. But yeah,
that's awesome. They've been a blessing, and obviously I'm a man and I'm enjoying listening to them, but they are specifically geared towards women, and I think they're a fantastic discipleship tool. So ladies that I may see, if you guys just look up Home Fires on basically any podcast platform, you'll be able to find them. And you guys are on Instagram and on Facebook. So look up the episodes. The next one up in my queue here is the one you guys did with Rosaria Butterfield. So I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you guys for what you do. Thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you very much. And folks, if you do want to enter the drawing to receive both of Tilly's books, the first one is Seeing Green and her most recent one is Broken Bread, go ahead and email us at life@mercyhillchapel.com and put Equip Drawing as the subject. And if you win, we'll contact you at the end of the month. Thank you for listening.